Hi there, welcome to the channel. My name is Nicole with Morning Chores. Today's video is an introduction to rabbits. We're going to talk about everything you need supply-wise to start up your rabbit operation, whether you're just starting with a few rabbits or you want to start a really big operation, although I would recommend starting small and then building to that bigger operation. So we're going to talk about housing, feeders, everything you need to get started. When you're trying to make the decision to bring an animal onto your property, whether you're raising that for some sort of commodity, whether it's food or fiber or whatever the reason, there's a lot of things to consider. You need to consider how much upfront costs are there going to be, how much is it going to cost to feed this animal and take care of it, how long am I going to have the animal from the time it's purchased to the time that you process it, for example. All of these things you need to take into consideration. And is it really worth it? Is it really worth having this animal on my property, taking care of it? Am I going to get out enough to compensate the cost, the time, and the energy? And these are lots of things to consider, and we should be doing this with every animal we bring onto the property. So today we're going to discuss rabbits. And one of my favorite books that I like to reference a lot is this book here. It's called The Backyard Homestead Guide to Raising Farm Animals. I love this book because it's laid out very simply and it helps you make those decisions. All the information is really laid out for small operation to bigger operation. The first item that you need to consider is, why do you want rabbits in the first place? And there's usually 3 reasons. Number 1 is a pet. Rabbits do make great pets, especially for kids, because they're small, they're pretty easy to take care of, and they don't require a lot of upfront costs. The second reason is you want to raise rabbits for meat. They do supply a good source of meat, and a lot of people raise rabbits for a meat source. And the third reason is for fiber. There are some rabbits that are good to use their fur to transition into yarn, so you can make scarves and hats and things like that. So once you've considered why you want rabbits, you can start to narrow down what type of breed of rabbit you should purchase. So for example, if you want a pet as a rabbit, then you're going to look at something, for example, a lion's head rabbit. We have a lion's head, his name is Butterscotch, and he makes a great pet. He's not only cute and cuddly, but he does like to be held, and he's super fun to have around the place for us to hang out with and just take care of and cuddle with and just watch him play. If you're considering having rabbits for meat, then you might consider something like a New Zealand or a Californian. That is our white rabbit. Her name is Peaches. She is a good rabbit for meat, so if you want to raise rabbits for meat, that's a good breed to consider. And the third reason is fiber. If you're looking to raise rabbits for the fur, to use the fur, you might consider a breed such as Angora. Now, I don't know much about rabbits for fiber personally, but I do remember meeting a lady at our local fair, and she raised rabbits for their fur, and she was turning the fur into yarn and then using that yarn to knit scarves and things like that, and it was super, super soft. So as you can see behind me, we have 3 different housing choices, and there's all kinds of options for housing, but the main key with housing your rabbits is you want to protect them from the elements, and you want to protect them from predators, and you also want to provide space and options for exercise. These are the main 3 things. So when it comes to protecting them from weather, they need covered, they need out of the wind and out of the rain. Those are the 2 big things. Rabbits actually are very cold tolerant. They're more cold tolerant than they are heat tolerant. So in the winter time, I think this past winter, our coldest temps were maybe -10 to -20. And we did move their hutches into our garage just to provide an extra layer of protection. And on those extra cold winter nights, and when we had those really low temps, I put a very heavy blanket over their hutch, and they were fine. They handled it very, very well. When it comes to heat, so for example, we've had some days of 90-degree temperature and very high humidity, and I'm actually more concerned about that. And I'll talk a little bit more about how I handle that later, but just to touch base here, I usually put a frozen water bottle in their cage during the heat of the day, just to give them something to kind of lay next to help cool them down. Also, you want to especially in the summertime, put their hutch in a shady area, somewhere where there's not going to be direct sunlight beating on them. So in this space right here, they get the early morning sun, and it does start to get a little hot around 10 a.m. and the sun will kind of beat down, which is why I have a piece of wood on this side to provide some shade. But otherwise, they do pretty well. And then usually by noon, this part is pretty shaded, so I don't have to worry about it as much. But if you can put them under a tree or something like that, somewhere where they're gonna get a little bit of a breeze, that's always helpful too. There's all kinds of options for rabbit hutches. This one we purchased online, and one of the other ones I purchased secondhand off of Facebook Marketplace. Sometimes people prefer to build them. So there's a couple key things that I want to share. Number one is whatever hutch you purchase, whether you build it yourself or you purchase it, you want to make sure that the floor is a wire mesh. You do not want a solid floor. And the reason is because you are going to spend way more time than you ever wish cleaning that hutch out. Because let's face it, rabbits have to go to the bathroom and they pee and they poop. And I will talk a little bit more about how you can offset this, but having a wire floor will allow all of that defecation to fall through to the ground. So ours is set up here, and let me get the camera down so you can see what I'm talking about. This hutch did not have a floor on the bottom. It just went straight to the grass or the ground. So my husband built this stand to lift it up off the ground, and then we installed a mesh floor. And the mesh floor allows all the defecation to go through to the ground. This piece of wood I have here to keep the dog from eating, but what we do is when it gets full down here is we move the hutch, and I scoop as much up off the ground, put it in a bucket, and then I put it on my compost pile. And I only have to do this maybe once every 2 months. It's not that often. And what I like about it is it just eliminates a lot of extra cleaning. If this was a solid floor, I would have to clean it probably once a week. And it's not just like an easy wipe down. I would have to hose it, spray it, scrub it, all those things. And so having the wire mesh floor makes it a lot easier. Now, some people like to use bedding, and if you go to a pet store to buy your rabbit, they will try to sell you and try to convince you that you need to buy bedding for your rabbit. Again, you're just creating more work for yourself. So if you do have a solid floor, you either need to consider a litter box, or you need to have bedding, and then you're cleaning that bedding out once a week. I will talk more about the litter box when we talk about the extra things that you need, but having a litter box helps slow down having to clean out this, and I'll explain more about that later. Now up here in this area, there is a solid floor, and this one slides out. Was there a rabbit? Oh, come on, you gotta get that, get out. Go on, go down, go down. Sometimes it gets really stuck. So as you can see, this has a tray up here, and they do not pee up here, but they clearly poop up here. So I have to clean this usually about every 2 weeks. I have to just clean it out, and I'll just shake it out like this. And I may have to clean a little bit extra like I do right now. But for the most part, this stays pretty clean, and it's because they urinate in the litter box down there, which I'll talk more about later. The other thing you need to consider with your rabbit hutch is protection from predators. This is very important, especially if you're keeping your rabbits outside. We live in the country where we have every kind of wildlife imaginable. We have raccoons and possums. We have mice and deer and foxes and groundhogs. We have all the things. Now, thankfully, I've never had an issue with a predator. I think partially it's because I have them near the house. I think too, we're just outside a lot, and we have a dog. So I think there's multiple things, but it can still happen. So you want to make sure that you have pretty strong walls for your hutch. We have this wire mesh, which some animals probably could get into, but thankfully so far it's enough of a deterrent that it hasn't been an issue. My only negative thing I have to say about this particular hutch is that I wish it was more up off the ground. There are hutches that stand taller, and they would start up here, and those are it's just an extra protection against predators, especially dogs and things like that. If they're up higher, it's harder for a predator to get into. So that's my only downside with these hutches, and this one in particular, is that it's a little close to the ground than I would prefer. And the last consideration with your shelter is that you want to find a shelter that has a ramp. This one has a ramp that goes from the first floor up to the second floor, and what that does is it gives them exercise in their daily routine. So if your rabbits are spending the majority of their time in a structure like this, you need to implement things to give them exercise. Now that we've discussed housing, let's talk about feeders and waterers. Feeding your rabbit and of course providing water are probably the two most important things, especially water, and especially when it's really hot. You need to make sure that they have water at all times. Not just water, but clean water. So I like to use these side bottle waterers, and you just attach them to the cage from the outside and poke this through the wall, and I usually just bungee cord it, and we just make sure that they're full at all times. And we have 2 of these for our 2 rabbits. That way, if one goes empty, they have the other one. The next thing you want to consider is your feeder, and there's lots of different feeders, from open bowls, ones that hang on the wall. I like this one. This is technically for chickens, and we already had it, but I like this one because it hangs on the inside of the wall and you just fill it from the top. And I like this one because you can fill it and it's good for a couple of days. So my son is in charge of feeding the rabbits and my daughter is in charge of watering the rabbits. So he'll fill this up every couple of days, and it just comes out of the bottom, and I like that it hangs on the wall so it keeps the feed clean. Now when it comes to feed, there's all kinds of options. You just want to make sure that you're buying a feed that has the correct protein percentage. That is really important. I keep all of the feed and the rabbit stuff here. Again, I'm trying to make it really convenient for my kids to do because this is their job. So I keep the feed in the bucket right here. This is hay that we use mainly for winter. During the summer, spring, fall months, and even in some parts of winter, we just pick grass from the yard and we give that to them once a day as a treat. So my son will come out and pick some grass, or sometimes I'll do it if I think about it and I'm just out here. But you just pick a handful of grass and put it in there, and they love it. They love the clover, they love the grass. One thing that I had a friend tell me is you don't want to feed them too much dandelion because it could cause, I can't remember if it was constipation or diarrhea, but she said be mindful of how much dandelion you give them, but otherwise the clover, the grass, they just love it. So that is there like that, and I put it right next to the door. Again, I try to make it really convenient for my son so he can reach right in here and feed the rabbits. Then over here I have the waters, and I have them on the outside with the metal part sticking through so they can get to their water, and we just have it bungee cord on the outside to make it easy so that my daughter can easily take them off, fill them with water, and put them back on. So now that we've discussed housing, waters, and feeders, let's talk about some extras. One thing that I like to keep here in the rabbit hutch is a litter box. Now we technically don't need a litter box because we have the wire mesh floor, so all of that runs through to the ground. However, I have found that a litter box is handy in helping contain the urine. The urine is what is really smelly, and when I don't have this in here, they urinate and it sits on this ground and it just gets really smelly very quickly. So I have to clean it more often, and I also have to throw some kind of shavings or something to help eliminate that smell. So I find having the litter box helps contain the urine. So when that gets full, I just dump it, rinse it, and put it back, and it's just much easier to manage, and it doesn't smell as bad, especially since we have these near our house. I don't want to smell that, and my guests and people that come over, they don't want to smell that either. So that's an extra thing that I find is very helpful. Another extra thing we already mentioned is the ramp. I think it's important to give your rabbits some form of exercise, and they will hop up and down on that, climb it all day long. So I think that is really helpful. Another extra that is important is a frozen water bottle. So when it is really hot out here, usually from 10 a.m. to about 3 p.m., sometimes 4 p.m., it will get really hot, especially if it's in the 90s and there's high humidity. So I keep a bag of frozen water bottles, and it is better to use the water bottles that have a thicker wall. Some of these water bottles, or these water bottles that they sell, the plastic is so flimsy and thin that the rabbits will just chew right through it. But this one, like the Aquafina water bottles, they can't chew through them because they're really thick. But I will put this in here during the heat of the day or just before the heat of the day hits, and they love laying next to it, and it just helps keep them cool. The other two extra things I can think of, which I already kind of mentioned, is giving them hay as a treat. Some people like to put a salt lick in here. I put one in here and they never used it, so I didn't really see the point in that, but you can also hang a salt lick for them to get some minerals. And then we also, like I said earlier, we put them in a run to provide some extra exercise and playtime and give them time to eat some grass, and they just love it. Thank you for joining us in today's video. I hope that you found it helpful. All of the links mentioned in the video will be in the description box below. You can also find lots of other videos on gardening, food preservation, chickens. All of that is also on our channel, so if you need some extra watching, you can head over there to check out those videos. Hope you guys have a wonderful week, and we'll see you on the next video.